Friday night, Nebraska and its fans got a huge dose of reality after losing in overtime, which probably the quickest overtime you've ever seen, probably the most pathetic overtime performance you've ever seen at any level of football. But shout out to Illinois. They're a really good, fun team to watch. Brett Bielema stays beating Nebraska, and I'm sure they'll represent the Big Ten well. Because it won't be us, Gary. We've got a new focus, okay? Getting a decent bowl game. Can we start there?
Yeah, I wouldn't go overboard. I wouldn't go from thinking, oh, Nebraska's a dark horse college playoff team to can we eke out a bowl win? Like there's kind of like where we were trying to gauge the team based off of those wins. There's a lot of gray area. They're not trash and they're not title contenders, but where in that gray area are they? And I think we got a lot better gauge of that tonight. And I think it's the same thing for the outlook of the future is this is the first game of the Big Ten, right? And Illinois is going to have to play some tough Big Ten teams where they got Penn State next week, I think. So, like, it's not like their schedule gets easy. Everybody's going to play everybody for the most part. So, I mean, we'll see how it pans out. It legit is one game. Luckily, that's to a ranked team. Luckily, that's early enough in the season that the blemishes on this team, I felt like they are now forced to have their eyes put to a magnifying glass and see what they are. And they have time to work on it. Purdue's not a good team. That being said, you can't sleep on anybody, obviously. But this is early enough in the season. It doesn't destroy your season as far as what the real expectations for Nebraska should be. It gives you a very rude cold shower of a wake-up call and some very clear-cut things that you need to work on before you get and carry on through this Big Ten schedule. But I want to say like the biggest one word to sum up like the emotions for this, the way this game was just disappointing, man. Like it's one thing to get beat by a team better than you. It's another thing to have a bunch of calls not go your way, but to be so out of sorts on the defensive side, which has been this team's strong point going back to last year, regardless of whether you think the officials were they're bad in general or they had something out for Nebraska, it was lopsided, many self-inflicted wounds. The kicking situation, and I screwed up. I didn't realize that wasn't Alvano. Like I don't pay attention to these games as well as I would like to, especially when we're streaming. It's not an excuse. I need to pay attention to that. But it wasn't like we were asking somebody to kick a 48-yarder into the wind or something. Like you can break it down to a lot of things. It shouldn't have come down to a field goal the way that game was going, or the way I won't say the way the game was going, but what Nebraska's capable of. I just feel like the things that you would hang your hat on, the things you and I discussed before we did the preview video, I used the same analogy when we were live streaming at the end. We didn't prepare talking about the Colorado game last year and go, well, Sims is probably going to fumble 3 or 4 snaps and leave them in field goal range. There's just things like that you don't anticipate. And the defense looking like the defense did, I don't think anyone anticipated. And you add in, like I said, the calls, some of them warranted, some of them not. It was just an all around. There's a lot of accountability to be taken for the entire team. I would say the least is probably the receivers in Raiola. I felt like they did great. That being said, they had a chance to kind of put it away on that last drive, or all but put it away. Illinois style over 2 minutes, and they would have played called different than they did down the stretch. But I don't think you crumble up and throw away the season by any stretch. I think it's good time in the year to have an abomination, I would say, almost of a game. If you're going to have one, it's not like you've got a clean record going and you need this win to make a playoff or to be playing in the conference title game or something like that, and you look like that. So it's definitely not good. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and it's also not the end of the world. So all I would expect them to do is all they can do is really dissect the tape on what the root problem is. Last week it was lack of tackling. This week the tackling didn't look a ton better, but now guys are out of position. To the second half, they're just getting kind of ragdolled, out physical, and that's not very characteristic of what we gotten accustomed to seeing on the defensive side.
I definitely believe that Nebraska got exposed. I just can't exactly put my finger on who got exposed the most. In your opinion, was it Matt Rule, Tony White, or Dylan Raiola?
Definitely not Raiola. Like, I think he's by far the least to blame for this game. Like I said, him and I thought the receivers had a really good showing this go. Like, I haven't watched enough, gone back and watched enough to really pinpoint it, but at risk of sounding like an idiot in hindsight, when I do go back and watch it, I would say the secondary. I think The secondary allows, and whether that's the personnel, like the guys themselves in the secondary, or it's Tony White's scheming, or John Butler, his new style, or whatever his change of things in that secondary is, maybe not meshing as well as Cooper's did with White. I don't know exactly what it is, but it seems like Nebraska is a 10 to 12 yard pass in the middle or in between the flats and the over the top zones waiting to happen on every play. And it's driven me nuts since last year. You've heard me go off about it all the time. But they usually got into that sweet spot where the field shortens up and those zones, those openings in the zones aren't so big and they shut teams down or hold them to field goals. And then you mix in maybe getting some turnovers in there, right? So, and doing really well stopping the run. They didn't do as great of a job stopping the run in the second half. I thought they did pretty well the first half.
That's what I was thinking is D-line, because we're living under this notion, whether it's true or not, that we have two interior defensive linemen that could be playing in the pros today. The fact that we got little to no pressure, that's concerning for me, because what does that mean for us when we get to Ohio State?
Well, I don't think Ohio State should be in anyone's minds or mouths right now. Like, we're clearly not in that league, right? We don't belong in the end of the top 25 after tonight. That could change in a few weeks. It could change at the end of the year, change next year. I don't know, but I wouldn't put the cart before the horse in that. As far as you're alluding to Hutmacher and Robinson, I don't think this exposed them at all. I think we've played weak offensive lines. We played Colorado, who went with no tight ends, and you're really looking at a 3-man front. You know, you get Princewell, you get Cam, sometimes you get Williams, whoever. You get a little help on the side, but they're not always helping to try and get pressure on the quarterback. So now you're playing Illinois, who will go in 11 and sometimes 21 personnel, or even 12, and have a fullback back there, or double running backs. But when you have a legit, and I wouldn't say decent, Illinois team, they're a really good team. They deserve to be ranked. They deserve to be ranked higher than what they were coming into this game. And you don't do that with a horrible or a mediocre or whatever offensive line. So you have a solid, legit Big Ten offensive line. You add 2 tight ends to it, almost always at least 1 tight end, but then you sometimes 2, whatever else. And you really have 3 guys that are trying to get pressure, and they're constantly being double teamed. Like, it got to a point in the game where they'd have to blitz the corners off the edges to do things. The one turnover at the end of the game with a quarterback fumble was Buford coming off of a blitz off the edge. So I don't think we can expect them to be superhumans that are just going to blow up two guys every play and create this pressure when it's being schemed to stop them, you know. And there was times where they would get through, but there would be a guy to come to like pin them into where they're at, and the pocket would shift, or the run would go the opposite direction and they're already out of the play. It goes both ways. Like, I think they've covered up quite a bit for the secondary in getting pressure to the quarterback and making the ball come out soon. Sometimes it would be nice for guys like that are getting double teamed on every single play to have the secondary actually get some coverage sacks. Like, lock up a guy. Don't leave 18-yard zones wide open for the receivers to run and sit in, and then maybe gain a couple yards to do, you know what I mean? Like, when the quarterback has time to throw and the secondary is going to sit there and leave these pockets to go, I mean, there's no reason for the offense to change anything. If you're not doing anything to force them to change something, I don't know, other than telling those guys, hey, sorry, you need to beat 2-3 guys every single play and get pressure on because things aren't working. That's just not plausible, man. Like, at some point the scheme needs to change if that's not happening. But that's where I go back again, at risk of sounding dumb, before I go look at things, that the secondary is just not, it's not on the tier that the defense is usually at when it's playing. Like, even when the defense seems like it's humming and doing its thing, we're still giving up those big plays, or even those like medium chunk plays through the air until the field tightens up, and by default the zones aren't there. So I thought they did a little bit better once they switched and started going to man, but you also had guys that would just at will get open on in the man coverage, you know, especially if the pressure wasn't there. So
you and I have too much respect for Tony White to really go in on him. We know that he's likely forgotten more football than we've ever known.
Sure.
At least I know for me personally. So,
for sure.
And Matt Rule, ultimate respect. This was one loss to a really good team that deserves to be where they're at and higher. And it's a good learning lesson. Our goals are still in front of us, which was a bowl game. Playoff stuff was obviously too early, worrying about Ohio State too early, but we got the right guy at the helm, and for now we got the right defensive coordinator at the helm to get things figured out.
You got the right quarterback, an explosive talent at skill positions. You've got guys. They need to go to work. They got a good sample tonight of what the flaws are. You know, like what you can nitpick and try to find things to work on when you're beating people handedly. But when you have a game like this, there's no shying away or acting like, well, I don't know, maybe we can find something to tweak or no, it's glaringly obvious a few things that need to be worked on. I think that we, like to your point, we have the guys that can get it done. And there's no reason to all of a sudden think that these players on the squad are trash. I don't think that for a second. It's just you went in with a particular game plan. Between not fully executing that and also being forced to see what other teams are able to game plan when they look at your tape, you got a lot of work to do. You got a lot of things that you can work on in, you know, a little bit longer week. Now, as a downside going into this game was it was a short week. Now you got an extra day between your recovery, which they're going to need. When Hill went down, sounds like Corcoran's probably going to be gone for the better part, if not all the season again. You know, Mizuka was out. Like, there's a lot of things that went into all this that probably overlooked in the knee jerk when everybody thought we should probably just win by 10, 20 or whatever. We're guilty of kind of assuming the same thing. But there's a lot of things to look at now, a lot of stuff to work on. And luckily you got Purdue coming up next week. It's going to be on the road. So that's, some coaches really like that, you know, to get away from home and the expectations, things like that, and kind of have a us against the world mindset. But there's a lot to work on in a game that you can really kind of test out and see how well you worked on it. It's not like you're going to Ohio State now, you're going to USC or Michigan, Penn State, any of them or whatever. So I think they'll be fine, man. I really do. It's just, it kind of sucks that there was this balloon continually inflating of like confidence and like, oh my God, are we finally getting back? And then immediately the way the game ended, I feel like a lot of people are just like, oh no, never mind. But I don't think it's either one. You know, I don't think it's super high expectations should have been had, but I don't think we should think that this is the same old Huskers and we're going to be struggling to get into a bowl game. I don't think that'll be the case.